Hey, how's it going? I'm Seth, and in this video, we're going to talk about a land valuation and pricing tool called Price Boss. So vacant land has always been a really difficult type of property to appraise and find property values for because unlike houses and other types of improved properties, the data that we need to do this is all over the place. It's very imperfect, and sometimes you can't really find it at all. And so it kind of creates this quandary and this problem for land investors who are trying to make offers on properties based on what the thing is worth when it's so stinking hard to figure out what the thing is worth. And you can usually stumble through this process on your own without software. It's just going to take a whole lot more time and mental frustrations and headaches to find all that information and pull it together and draw some kind of meaning out of it. And that's where something like Price Boss can be really helpful because it allows you to generate hundreds, even thousands of relevant comps from websites like Zillow, Lands of America, Realtor.com, and other sources, and you can plug it into the software and it will pull out all the information you need and help you figure out those answers a lot faster. It can also help you put together blind offer and range offer campaigns with offer prices plugged right into the lists using lists from places like DataTree or Priced or even MapRight. And the whole system is built on a series of Google Sheets that work together to run the calculations and give you usable data on the back end, which you can use to make offers on individual properties or put together blind offer campaigns or range offer campaigns and actually a lot of other cool stuff. Now, this is not the first time I've talked about Price Boss. I actually put together a pretty useful review and tutorial about this years ago, back when the software first came out. But since that time, a lot has changed. There's other software options out there that do kind of a similar thing. And even Price Boss itself has changed quite a bit. There's some new tools and features. It's faster, a little bit easier to use now. And one of the many new things about Price Boss now is the pricing. So back when it first came out, you could buy it with a one-time fee. Now it's set up as a subscription payment option with an initial setup fee. And actually, for that matter, you can get a $50 discount on that setup fee if you sign up with the RE Tipster promo code. So just head over to the checkout page. I'm gonna have a link beneath this video. And when it asks for the coupon code, just put RE Tipster in there. You'll get the discount and RE Tipster will get a small kickback for referring you there. So there you go. And aside from being a lot easier and faster to use now, Price Boss also has a couple new analysis tools that help you really quickly find out who some of the big players are in the local market in terms of land specialized real estate agents, and also who some of the other big land investors are in terms of how many listings they have, the pricing, the acreage, that kind of thing. There is a ton of ground to cover here. All right, lots of stuff to talk about. I'm not going to hit it all, but just for what it's worth, whatever I don't hit, just be aware there are some really helpful video tutorials throughout the software itself. So if you ever decide to use this and you get stuck somewhere along the way, there's some pretty good instructions about how to get through it and how to take the next step. And I'm also going to include some timestamps on the screen right now. So if you do want to skip around to different parts of the video where I talk about different things, you're welcome to do that. So let's get started, shall we? So if we head over here to the Lands of America tab, that's what LOA stands for. And let's head over to Lands of America right now. We're going to go ahead and type in a county and state and see how this works. So I'm going to go with Costilla County, Colorado. And as with most of these real estate listing websites, they give you a lot of different filtering options for which results you want to have showing. So what I'm going to do in this example is go with all of the listings that are priced between 0 and we'll say $50,000. And the acreage sizes are going to be, let's go 2 to 10 acres, just like how I have it in here. And there's other filters you can use here if you want. And one important thing to keep in mind with Lands of America is that it's not the best one for getting sold comps. You're certainly going to find some in there, but because on Lands of America, this is a voluntary thing, sellers don't have to put the sold prices in there if they don't want to. That just means you're not going to have as much data to work with. So if you're going to use Lands of America, you might want to just stick to the available listings rather than the sold ones, just for the sake of having enough data to work with. We're going to go ahead and apply filters and let it compute here. And then we're going to grab this URL and then go right in here and paste that URL and click compute. And it says it can take up to 2 minutes, but in my experience, it usually doesn't take that long. So there we go. Price Boss just crawled all those pages and pulled out all of these listings. And it tells us how many total listings we have here with the price and size. Also, by the way, with all of these different tabs, if you ever get lost or you're just not sure what you're doing or how to work through it, you can always click on here, and there's some pretty helpful training videos that walk you through how to use the sheet. But that's really how you do it. And we're not quite done yet. What matters a lot more than this is the next step when we get down here to comp data and offer analysis, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. Before we go there, I'm going to show you how to do this on Realtor.com. It's a pretty similar process. You just go up here to Realtor.com. And similar to Lands of America, we would just type in the county and state we're looking for and go ahead and click enter. And it's going to show you all this stuff. Now, one thing about Realtor.com is that it works a little bit different fundamentally than Lands of America does, because Realtor.com is all MLS listings, whereas Lands of America, not necessarily. There can be a lot of individual investors and landowners listing their stuff on that site. So you're going to find usually some different types of listings in sold comps here. Realtor.com is also generally better for finding sold comps, because most of these are going through the MLS. So they're going to come from that system, and those records are actually going to be there. Similar to Lands of America, we can sort this however we want to with the filtering options they give us. We could go by price again. So let's go, 0 to 50,000, just like we did on the other site. In property type, unlike Lands of America, you're not going to be able to assume that it's all vacant land here unless you tell it that. So we're going to select land. And for listing status, we could either do recently sold or for sale. In this case, because the sold comps are more likely to be available, I'm going to go ahead and select that. And one little quirk about Realtor.com is that it doesn't have as many filtering options in terms of seeing only sold comps from the past X number of months or years like Zillow can, which we'll see in just a minute. So it's harder to narrow it down specifically based on how old those sold comps are. But one way we can work around this is by sorting all these listings by the sold date, which we can see right here. That's how this currently is set up. So we do it that way just to see the most recent ones. In this case, we've only got 24 comps. But whatever the case is, you can copy this and then come on over here to Price Boss, paste it in there and click compute, and it does the same kind of thing. It says it could take up to 2 minutes, but most likely it's not going to take that long. And there we have them. Simple enough. Now let's go over here to Zillow, and I'm going to show you how to do the exact same thing in the Zillow tab. Let's go ahead and search for Costilla County, Colorado. For the filtering options, we're going to do sold on these. And for price, let's go ahead and do that same metric we were using before, 0 to 50,000. And then we want to make sure we're only selecting lots and land. And over here for more, so we're going to say sold in the last 6 months. So if you remember, this was something that we can't do on Realtor.com, is specify it this precisely, but we can on Zillow. So we're going to do what we can do. And Zillow is a little bit less clean in terms of getting this data over to Price Boss. We can't just copy and paste the URL in there like we could with Lands of America and Realtor.com. But what we can do is just click anywhere on this window. And if you're on a PC, you can click Control A, or if you're on a Mac, you can click Command A and select everything, literally all of the text on the screen, and then hit Control C on a PC or Command C on a Mac to just copy it. And once it's all copied, we can come back over here to Price Boss, and we're going to go right here where it says page 1 in that yellow cell and click Control V if you're on a PC, or Command V if you're on a Mac, or just right click paste, and it's going to paste all that data in there. And it's a complete mess of data, but that's okay because Price Boss knows how to filter through that and sort it all out. And if you want to get more comps than what is just here on the first page, we can scroll down here and click on page 2 and do the exact same thing. I'm on a Mac here, so I'm going to click Command A and then Command C to copy it, and then go over here for page 2 and Command V to paste it all in there. So now the second page is in, and then we can go back here to Zillow and go to page 3, and same thing, Command A, Command C, and then paste this in here. And it looks like I could keep going up through page 8 if I wanted to, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to say this is good enough for now. And when we click compute, what Price Boss is going to do is sort through all this stuff here and make sense of it and order it nicely and neatly over here on the left, similar to how it did for the Realtor.com and the Lands of America tabs. So we'll go back over here to Zillow, and there we go. We can see it right there. Now, one thing you can do with Zillow that you can't do with Realtor.com and Lands of America is you can mix and match sold and for sale listings. With these other two, you kind of have to decide, am I going to use sold or for sale comps? You can't mix and match both of them in the same sheet. But with Zillow, you can if you want to. So say if we didn't have enough data, we could go over here and say, let's go get the for sale ones now. It's going to completely repopulate all these listings, and we could go through the same motions again. So we're going to copy this now from the first page, and I'm going to move over here to page 4 to paste it there, just so that we don't overwrite our existing one there. And then we'll go to page 2 here, and all this, copy that. And then page 3 of the for sale listings. Same thing, copy all this, paste it there. And now I can hit compute again. And now we're going to have a mixture of sold and for sale listings from the same county right here. And there we go. Now we got all those listings in there. Some of them are sold and some of them are for sale. And just some useful stuff I'll point out here on this particular sheet. So when it comes to days on Zillow, this is something about Zillow that's always been a useful feature, because Zillow will tell you how many days that listing has been on the market, which is useful to know just in terms of, how quickly our property is selling in this market. How long has this particular property been sitting out there? And it can kind of help you assess how quickly properties are moving in a given market, or if there's a particular property that has not sold for a long time. You might not know why, but it could at least tell you, for whatever reason, people aren't buying this property. And in Price Boss, it will just sort of outline the average days on the market for all of those listings that you put in there. And it'll also tell you the high number and the low number and the median. And usually that median number is the most valuable one to go by. But again, all that information is right there. And honestly, I don't want to gloss over this, because this thing right here is actually worth a lot. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through Zillow and just tried to gather meaning by looking at dozens and dozens of different individual listings, trying to mentally keep inventory of how many days on market properties seem to be in that area. But it's really hard to do, because I'm not actually keeping track of the numbers in one consolidated place that shows me the average and the medium and the high and the low. So the fact that Price Boss just pulls it all in here and shows you a concise number in seconds is kind of a huge time saver, just in terms of giving you something meaningful to work with without taking a ton of time and guesswork to get it. We can obviously see the zip code of each individual property and the price that it either sold for or is listed for, in the acreage, in the town, and we can even click on a link to go and visit each individual listing if we want to do that. And something that we're going to get to a little bit later about Price Boss that makes it so useful is that you can get very, very granular with how you want to assess comps. Like you could do it by the zip code level, only the properties in this zip code, or by the subdivision level, or you could even go over here to Zillow or to Realtor for that matter and click on the map and use this draw tool to zoom in and draw only around a very specific area where you want these comps to be located, kind of like this. Just draw like this. There you go. And then this way you can go and copy this URL over to Price Boss. And then when you do this and click compute again, when it gives you these results, you can really specifically label this geographic area of property listings. Like we could call this, ABC, and then apply this label to all these instead of using a zip code, because you may not necessarily want to filter by the zip code. Maybe there's some other criteria that you're using to filter these properties and use a group of comps together. So just be aware you can do that. And this becomes a little bit more important in one of the future steps that we're going to get to down here in the comp data and offer analysis tab. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that data out and put the original filtering criteria I had in here just for the purpose of showing you the next step. But just be aware you can label comps and use them together based on different criteria than just the zip code if you're willing to get in here and use that draw tool. So moving on here to the Realtor Analysis tool. So this is one of the new features that's been added to Price Boss that I think is honestly pretty brilliant. So this particular set of data you're seeing here is not the best illustration because there's not a whole lot of listings to pick from. So what I'm going to do is go to a different market really quick, and we're going to find an area where there's just a lot more listings to work with. So let's try Orange County, California. And we're going to change this so that it's pretty much any price. And let's grab this URL and go back over here to the Realtor.com tab, because, by the way, very important, all this data is being pulled from the Realtor.com tab. It's not taking it from Zillow or from Lands of America. Got to go to Realtor.com. I'm going to go ahead and clear this thing out and paste this thing in there, hit compute again, let it pull in all those listings. Okay, so now if we go back over here to the Realtors Analysis tab, here we go. That's a lot more helpful. So what this tab does is it looks at all those listings out there and it tells you which realtors and agencies in this area are the top dogs based on the number of listings that they have out there, the average price, and the average acres. And unfortunately, it doesn't currently tell you who the specific individual is that's listing all these. It's just telling you which company as a whole has the most ads and the average price and the average acres. And what you can do here is just click on any of these things and it's going to do a Google search, and it should be pretty easy to find the website of that office, and then you can go ahead and reach out to them and contact them and figure out who is listing all these properties and selling these things. And in some cases, this is going to be less helpful. For example, if we click on this one here, Compass, it's just going to do a Google search for Compass, which is not all that helpful. But we could type in like, Compass Realty, Orange County, California, fix the spelling on that. And then we should be able to get there a lot faster. So it's not necessarily going to connect all the dots for you, but you can just use your own logic and probably find it pretty quick and easily. But the reason this is so helpful, even though it doesn't tell you which specific individual is the successful agent, and that's ultimately what you want to get to, because that is the person who's going to have the knowledge and connections and all this stuff to help you figure out property values, go after the right properties, and get your properties sold if you end up using an agent at all. Even though this doesn't list out those individuals' names, it still gets you at least half the way there just by saying, hey, these are the companies that are doing the most activity based on how you filtered these property types in this market. So go ahead and reach out to them, and you can probably find them pretty quickly. Whereas if you didn't have a tool like this, it could take you a whole lot longer and require a lot more guesswork to find these people if you're able to find them at all. So this just helps a lot in figuring out how to find that land specialized agent. So I thought that was just a really creative way to use the data that's already there to just point out really clearly who those top players are. Then moving on over here to the competitor analysis. So this is kind of a similar thing, but the difference is what it's doing is it's pulling the data from what you put in the Lands of America tab. So remember, this is still back over there in Costilla County. And what it's doing is it's pointing out which competitors in this market have the highest number of listings on Lands of America. It shows the average price of those listings, the average acres, and if they are a premium subscriber to Lands of America, for whatever that's worth, that might imply that they're more serious about it or something like that. But if they had that subscription type, it would tell you that right here as well. And you might be wondering, kind of like I was at first, when you look at this, other than just being kind of interesting, why exactly is this useful to know about? Well, because when you look at which other land investing operations in your market are the most active and which are theoretically, probably doing the best in that area, this kind of chart over here on the right, which shows the average price and the average acres, might help you figure out gaps or underrepresented property types in this area. Like if there's certain acreage ranges that are underrepresented. And remember, we filtered this based on sizes of 2 to 10 acres. So that's all we're even seeing here. But if we did filter this by any acreage amount, it could tell us, hey, there's not a whole lot of properties in this acreage range. Like we're seeing here, there's not a whole lot of stuff that's precisely 8 acres in size, or even in that 6 to 10 acre range. There's just not a whole lot of stuff here. And there may be a reason for that. I mean, maybe there's just not that many properties of that exact size in this market. Or maybe for whatever reason, people who own those sizes of properties aren't motivated to sell. It doesn't really tell you that stuff. So there could be reasons for that. But on the same coin, maybe there's not really a good reason for that. And this could be pointing out a very specific opportunity that you can target that nobody else seems to be doing at this time. And it'll also show you who your biggest competitors are in this area, so you can figure out what are they doing and why are they doing so well. And maybe you can figure out ways to either emulate what they're doing or position yourself against them in some way. It might also help you figure out which county or market you should go after next in the first place. If you find an area where there's just a ton of competition in the precise type of property that you're trying to look for, then you might be like, hey, maybe I don't want to go down this road. I'm going to go find a different county somewhere else. And again, I just thought this was a brilliant way to take the information that's already there and do something useful with it. And once you understand why this is useful and how you can use it to make certain strategic decisions, it's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and move on now to the comp data tab. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to go back over here to the realtor.com tab because I had switched this to Orange County instead of Costilla County. So I'm going to go back to realtor.com and get the right county simply for consistency's sake, because if I'm using a totally different county, it's going to completely screw up the whole purpose of why I'm doing this. So I'm going to make sure I'm going back to what I was doing before. Costilla County. Okay, looks good. I'm going to grab this URL, go back to PriceBoss, go back to realtor.com, and then clear out this data here, and then put Costilla County back in there, compute it again, wait for that to be done. And by the way, as I've been hitting these compute buttons throughout this process, I've been editing this video down just for the sake of time. I'd say on average, it's taken about, I don't know, 15 to 20 seconds for these things to actually calculate, just so you have a feel for how long it actually takes to pull in those numbers. So now let's go back over here to the comp data tab. And what we're going to do is go up here and click import comps. And what it's going to do is pull in all of these comparable listings from all of the tabs where we have put this information. So whether there's something in Lands of America, Realtor.com, Zillow, all of them, or one of them, it's going to take all of that stuff and pull it in here and show us the source, whether it's for sale or sold. And it's going to show us the zip codes that they're from, the prices, acres, and the dollars per acre. And you'll notice that some of these things are highlighted in yellow. And the reason they're highlighted is because based on what PriceBoss is seeing, it thinks that they are probably duplicates. You don't really want to have duplicates in this kind of calculation because it will skew the numbers and the values that you're trying to come up with. So if it does see duplicates, you want to remove those. And there's two different ways it can do this. There's what's called strong dedupe and weak dedupe. And if you hover your mouse right here, it'll sort of explain what that means. So strong dedupe is what you want to use if your comps have full street addresses in them. But if you know anything about vacant land, a lot of times they don't all have physical mailing addresses assigned to them yet. In that case, you would want to use weak dedupe. And with weak dedupe, it's not necessarily going to remove them based on their full addresses, but it's going to look at like the street name, the size, the zip code, the price, and try to decipher whether there are duplicates based on that. And one way you can figure out whether or not your comps have addresses or not is to go back to these original tabs. If you go over here to this black bar and just click on it, so right up here, you'll be able to see what address, if any address, is assigned to that property. It's kind of hidden, but that's where it's pulling it from. So as we go down here, we can sort of see the address of each individual property. And it looks like, per usual, some of these do and some of these don't. In fact, I'm actually seeing that more often than not, there is not an address here. So I think I would probably be using weak dedupe in this case. Similar thing with the realtor.com tab. We're seeing that the address is right here. And it looks like, you know, some have addresses, some don't. Same thing with Zillow. You can see what the addresses are by clicking on this black bar. So given that it's kind of a mix, I'm going to go over here and I think weak dedupe is the most appropriate one to have selected here. And just so you understand the order and the flow of how this is supposed to go, because I didn't really understand this at first, you're supposed to select which deduping method you want first, and you can tell which one is selected by whichever one has that dark background behind the button. And once that's selected, then you click import. And after you click import, it's supposed to automatically take out the duplicates, but for some mysterious reason, some of them may still flow through. And if some do flow through, those are the ones that are going to be highlighted in yellow like this. And at that point, you can go and look closer at them and manually remove them if you want. And it looks like this one is almost certainly a duplicate. We're going to delete the row and move it up. And actually, I think a better way to see where these duplicates are right next to each other is to sort this by acres. So I'm going to click that button. It's going to resort the list. Looks like this one is listed 3 times. That's interesting how it's on Zillow twice. Not entirely sure why, but it looks like it's most likely a duplicate. So I'm going to remove that one here. I'm just going to assume these are duplicates, but if I was really concerned about it, I could dig a lot deeper and figure out whether or not it actually was, if there was any question about that. And really the idea is we just want to remove these ones that are highlighted. And it's as simple as that. And it looks like I got them all. So once that's all set, oh, actually one other thing up here. So right here, you can enter in the discount price for how much you want your offers to be if you're sending out like blind offers, for example. And this only applies to the ones that are for sale. This discount is not going to apply to ones that are sold. And the reason why you would want to do that just for the for sale ones is because in most cases, a property does not actually sell for the for sale asking price. A lot of times it's going to sell at a lower price. We don't necessarily know what that's going to be, and it's hard to say consistently what that will end up being, but we can acknowledge that more often than not, it's probably not going to go for that full asking price. So whatever kind of discount you want to apply to all of those for sale listings, you could do that here. You could do 25%, you could do 30%, you could do 50%. It's up to you. Kind of depends on the market and how well you know it and what tends to be typical for that area. But 25% without knowing anything else, that's probably a decent starting point. Now we can go over here to offer analysis, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. So what it's doing here automatically is it's pulling in all the comp data from the previous tab that we just saw, and it's sorting out all of those comps, and it's giving you this little chart over here on the right, which can kind of help you understand where the clusters of properties are in terms of their sizes and their values. And then you can also sort this scatter graph either by all of the comps, so literally everything is showing up right here, right now, or you can just isolate one zip code or market segment at a time as you defined it in the first place. And by default, it's going to use zip codes, but you don't have to do it that way. And the reason why you might not want to just use zip codes is because of what we're seeing right here. When I narrow it down to just one zip code, there's just not a whole lot of information right here. Or if I go over here to this other zip code, looks like there's a whole lot more in this one than that other one. But another way you could do this is to go back over here to the Lands of America, Realtor.com, and Zillow tabs. And instead of just keeping the zip code right here in the sub-county area, another way you could do it is copy and paste all of the actual town names and put those over here instead. And we could do the same thing over here on Realtor.com. Copy and paste that here. Same thing on Zillow, paste that here, and then go back over here to comp data. We're going to import comps again. And now we go back over here to offer analysis. And now the difference is instead of just showing zip codes, we can sort this by city instead of zip code, which might give us a lot more information in that one city or town than just by looking at it by zip code. See a lot more in this one as well. And in this case, these are all pretty small towns. They're not like these massive widespread areas with tons of variation. For the most part, if it's in that town, it's probably going to be a halfway decent comp. You probably wouldn't want to do it this way if you're looking at like San Diego, where there's like millions of different types of properties out there. But in this county, I think it could make sense. Another way you could do this is to sort it by like the subdivision or the neighborhood or this half of the town and the other half of the town. It's really however you want to do it. But the point is, if you can figure out whatever logic works for you, you can put that right here in this sub-county area column. And then over here in the offer analysis tab, it will sort that way, which is kind of a big deal because if you're able to get that granular about which comps you're looking at and how you're figuring out values, you can get a lot more accurate when you're sending out blind offers. You don't just have to price everything by the county because that really doesn't make sense in a whole lot of cases, because a 5-acre property on the north end of the county could be worth a whole lot more or less than a 5-acre property on the south side of the county. And when you're able to sort it this specifically, it just helps a lot in your accuracy. And you can also come up here and change up how these acreages are split into different chunks. For example, I could say I want all the properties that are between 0 and 1 acres in the first section. And then the next section will be all the properties that are between 1.01 and 5 acres. And then the next one will be 5.01 and 10 acres, and then 10.01 to 1,000 acres. And then we're going to go back and sort this by all so we can see everything. And this is going to change based on the market where you're working, because in some counties, the clusters of properties may be a lot more heavily skewed towards these smaller ones. And in other counties, they might be skewed towards the larger ones. It's up to you to figure out the right way to do that. So something you're going to see almost all the time when you put your comps in here and look at this chart is you're going to see this line of properties kind of going from the upper left over here to the lower right down in the corner. And the reason it pretty much always works this way is because when you're trying to figure out the value of land by the acre, the way it's going to work is the smaller the acreage of the property, the more it's going to be worth per acre. And then when you start moving over here to the larger acreage, it's going to be worth less per acre. The bigger the property is, the less the price is going to be per acre. And sometimes you might see outliers, like you might find a property way out here where the cost is a lot higher per acre, even though it's a huge property. Or maybe it's going to be way down here where the cost is super cheap, even though it's a teeny tiny property. And the reason it's helpful to see those and identify them right here is because those outliers can sometimes skew your valuation process, because you don't necessarily want to include outliers like that. And if you want to, you can find them and manually remove them. Like, for example, let's say this property right here. This isn't necessarily a big outlier. I probably wouldn't delete this just because it's right here, but just to illustrate for you how this would work, if I decided that this property was an outlier and I did not want to include this in my overall calculations of determining what property values are per acre, what I could do is head back over here to the comp data tab and find the 5-acre property that's worth $374 per acre. And I could do that by sorting it by acres and look for those 5-acre properties, scroll down here to the 5-acre one that's worth $374, and it's right here. So if I wanted to, I could just go ahead and highlight it and delete the row, and then go back over here to offer analysis, and now that outlier is gone because I deleted it. So that's one way that this scatter graph is really useful, is you can find the outliers and delete them. And another thing you can do is when you have all of the properties here, you can sort of figure out where the clusters of properties are. And the reason you might want to do this is because, again, when you're looking at all the vacant lots throughout an entire county, it almost never makes sense to calculate a single blind offer calculation on a per acre basis and send those offers to absolutely everybody, regardless of whether their property is a quarter acre or 1,000 acres, because again, we can see here the value of land on a per acre basis changes as the properties get bigger. So you want to reflect that in your blind offer prices when you're sending those out. And you can do that pretty easily with Price Boss. It gives you 4 different sections you can use to split up your properties based on how large they are and what the acreage is. And usually you can start just by looking at this scatter graph and just visualizing, okay, does there appear to be any clusters of properties in certain sizes? So if we just look at this at a high level, so it kind of looks like maybe the first split might be from 0 to, oh, I don't know, 2 acres. So we could say 0 to 2. And then the next split, we could start at 2.01 so that we're not double counting, and go up to maybe 6 acres. And then we could go 6.01 to 10 acres, and then 10.01 to 1,000. And I'm like literally doing this on the fly. I haven't looked very deeply at this. I don't know if this is necessarily the right way to do these splits, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point and explain how you can do this and why it matters. So now that we have these splits figured out, we can go up here and look at each little market that we've defined, and we're defining them by the town name. Again, I'm not even saying that's the right way to do it, but that's how I'm doing it in this scenario. And what this does is it shows for each town how many comps there are in each little split that we've set up and what the market value per acre is for those. So for example, in San Luis, we've got 101 comps, and we're seeing an average dollar amount per acre of 1,810. So that's a lot of comps to work with. So chances are that number is at least somewhat reliable. Whereas if we go over here to like Blanca and we see just one comp with a market value of 14,063 per acre. So one comp, I mean, that might be accurate, but on the same coin, that could just be some crazy person with a crazy idea of what their property is worth. Or it could just be an outlier property that just happened to sell for a lot. And based on this chart, it doesn't look like there's any crazy outliers, but again, it's just one comp, and one comp usually is not enough to make a really solid decision based on. But whatever the case, and whatever data you've plugged into the system, it's just going to outline really clearly, this is how many comps there are, and this is the market values in each section that you set up. And let's say, for example, you're looking at one specific property and you're trying to make an offer on that property. Let's say you're looking at another property in San Luis that is somewhere between 2 to 6 acres, and you want to make an offer that's like 30% of market value. Well, one way you could do that is to come up here to this market value cell and say, okay, well, let's do 30%. What would that look like? And it will show you right here in that particular market how many dollars per acre to offer, simply because you just went here and adjusted it from 100 to 30%. Or if you wanted to go over market value for some reason, you could do that as well. Just adjust whatever this market value is, just for the purpose of telling you how many dollars per acre it would be based on that assumption. And if you're using Price Boss because you want to send out a blind offer campaign, this cell is where you could enter in what your percentage of market value should be for all those parcels based on their location and their size. So if you wanted to go lower, you could make this 25. If you wanted to go really low, you can make this 10. It's whatever you want it to be. And if you wanted to send out hybrid offers, or as some people call them, range offers, you could put in your range here as well. So if you wanted it to be on the low end 20% or the high end 35%, and these are the cells you can use to set what that range is going to be. So once we've got a good handle on this, the next step is to go up here to this little lock icon and just Go ahead and click it. It's going to run another script. And what it's going to do, if we scroll over here to the right side, is it's going to take all that information and just lay it all out really clearly right here. And this is what's going to be used in the next step. And in the next step, we go down here to this source tab. And if you're using PriceBoss for the purpose of pricing out and sending out blind offers or range offers, this is where you're going to drop your list that you can get from either DataTree or Priced or even MapRight. And in this example, I've got a list I just downloaded from DataTree of just over 5,000 people. So I'm gonna go ahead and just highlight this and copy it all. And we can go up here to this yellow cell. And the way that this Google Sheet is laid out is it's formatted specifically for lists from DataTree. So you can just go right here to this yellow cell. And after you have copied everything here from this spreadsheet, like I'm doing right now, you just go right there and paste it. And something I've actually seen happen a couple times now, I've actually already edited them out of this video, but something I'm finding is that when I try to copy the list from this file, which came directly from DataTree and it's a CSV file, I don't know what the deal is, but it looks like there is a ton of data. I don't know if maybe some of it is like hidden data or something, but it's like this massive bloated amount of data that keeps causing this issue with PriceBoss where it says the page is unresponsive. So look, this eventually happens. Basically, the thing just breaks. So now I have to go back and go back to that same tab, go back to the source tab here. And what Howard was telling me to do was to open up a new Excel spreadsheet. So this is the original one. Then we're going to go open up this new one. And this is actually an Excel file, not a CSV file like this one is. So we're going to, again, copy this and then go over to this new spreadsheet. And we're not just going to paste it normally. We're going to right click and paste special and then paste as values only. And once it's in here, now we're going to copy this again and then head over here to PriceBoss. And again, right click, paste special, and then values only. Let's see if this works. And it still didn't work. Okay, let's try this one more time. Now, instead of trying to copy all this at once, let's maybe get the first couple thousand records because this is a pretty massive list here. Let's go to 2000, I guess 2001 to get all of them. Again, right click, paste special, values only. Let's see if this works now. It's not quite as much data, so maybe this will be able to handle it. Oh, look at that. Looked like it was going to have the error, but it went through. So there we go. Took a little bit of shuffling around, but we finally got that in there. And this isn't even all of it. If you want to include our entire list, I would have to go back down here and basically do the same thing again to get the rest of this list. We'll go here and then scroll down to the rest of it. And I guess, as I'm doing this, just side commentary. If you decide to use PriceBoss, just be aware that this is, literally a series of Google Sheets that a smart guy put together. This isn't made by a massive team of software engineers. So there are little bugs and glitches and problems like this that you might get stuck on. Luckily, Howard has always been super responsive to me in terms of, helping me get past this stuff and figure it out. But that's just kind of what comes with the territory when you're working with this kind of thing that isn't really perfect. And it does rely on Google and its systems and whatever limitations are in place there. So try this again, right click, paste special, values only. Let's see if this second half of the list works. Give it a minute to think about it. Okay, we got it in there. Hallelujah. So, and this is something that I've actually seen PriceBoss improve over the years. It used to be, even more rudimentary than this. So it's still got some buggy stuff in it, but you can certainly work through it. You just kind of have to know the tricks of how to get the Google Sheets to do what you want them to do. And hopefully as time goes on, this will get even better. Okay, so once you got your whole list pasted here into this sheet, whatever it takes to do that, now we're going to click this Format Data button, and it's going to run a script. And because this is such a huge list, it's probably going to take at least, 20 or 30 seconds for it to open up this new formatted sheet. And this is something that's normally hidden until you click that Format Data tab, and then it will open this up and drop all the data in the appropriate place here because it has to do this first in order to bring it over to the next mailer source sheet. And that's where we can actually start seeing our priced out offers and download our list. So it just automatically brought me over here. I didn't even have to click anything. And you can see now all of the data has been dropped right in here. And at this point, we can do one of two things. If we don't have access to Microsoft Excel, we can copy and paste all of this stuff onto a new Google Sheet and then save that. and start working with that to upload it to our mail service of choice, or we can download this as an Excel file if we do have Excel on our computer and if that's what we're more comfortable using. And that's actually my situation. I have Excel and use it all the time, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and click this prepare list for download button, and it's going to convert it to Excel, and I can download an Excel sheet. We'll go ahead and do that. Now it's running another script. Gotta give it some time to do this. Okay, and now we can click this link here to download the Excel list. So go ahead and do that. And it's going to put this into Excel. We can go down here and open it up. And then this is what our final exported Excel file should look like, where we can see all the property information nicely organized over here. And then over here on the right, we've got the market price, we've got the low range offer price, we've got the high range offer price, we've got our blind offer price. And you'll notice that these things right here, the days to offer expiration and then the days to closing. So normally those would be entered in as well, but the reason it's not here is because this isn't hooked up with LandSpeed, which is a much larger CRM system that Howard Zonder put together, and it's really meant to work hand in hand with PriceBoss. But you don't have to be a LandSpeed user in order to use PriceBoss. So if you're using PriceBoss but you're not using LandSpeed, these will be blank for you. But it's not really that hard to just manually type out whatever your offer expiration date should be, and then whatever your closing deadline should be, and then highlight it and drag it all the way down to fill all of them in the same way. So it's pretty easy to fill that in. And one thing I will say, so what you're seeing right here is an Excel file that actually took a little bit more work than it's normally supposed to. When I first downloaded this Excel file, I saw that this market price, range price, blind offer price, all this stuff was completely blank, which I was like, what? Isn't that like the whole point of PriceBoss, is to fill in those numbers? And the reason that they were blank in this instance is because Costilla County, Colorado is actually kind of a unique situation where when you download lists from DataTree for this particular county, you're going to find that when you go over here to the property zip code, and then also the property city, these are mostly blank in this county. And part of the reason is because a lot of properties in this county are not actually in an incorporated area. Like they're literally not located within a particular town's city limits. But over here on the comps tabs, where we pulled all these comps from, you'll notice that all of them specify a city. And that's not because these properties are all necessarily in those city limits. It's just because the people who are listing these properties have to put a city in there. And because of that disconnect, and because I told PriceBoss to sort these by the town instead of the zip code or subdivision or some other metric, there's like this disconnect because the comps that we're putting into the system, we're telling PriceBoss to sort them all based on the city as the sub-county area right here. And as a result, when we go over here to the mailer source sheet, when it comes over here to the sub-county column, PriceBoss is expecting to see city names in here that line up exactly with the city names of the comps we put in there, the ones that are showing up right here. And because most of the properties in this data set from DataTree were blank in this city column, that means that DataTree just doesn't have a whole lot of information to work with when it comes to actually putting together these prices. And likewise, this county is even more strange because again, in DataTree, the zip codes aren't even present, which is honestly very strange and rare. I can't even remember the last time I've ever seen that. So it looks like I picked kind of a tough county to work with simply because it was missing those key pieces of information. And you can't fix this kind of thing if you go over here to the latitude and longitude columns and copy all this stuff to a separate spreadsheet and then upload it to a website like this, which will take all those individual coordinates and then spit out the zip code that they're in. And then you can get that and then come back here and paste in those zip codes. It's honestly kind of annoying, but it is a workaround that you can use if you ever come across this strange and unusual issue. But just be aware, most of the time you're going to have at least a zip code in here and probably a city as well. And you could use either one of those to cluster the properties together, or you could get even more specific by like drawing out maps on Zillow or Realtor.com or doing it by the subdivision. But just be aware, however you decide to segment these properties, you need to make sure that that data is both in the comps that you're using and that you're selecting those appropriately, and the information actually shows up in the source tab and that it then moves over to this page, because if it doesn't do that, it's not going to come out here in your final priced list. And once you do have that information lined up in there correctly, it will work, and then it will look a lot more like this, where you actually see those numbers in there. So I hope that doesn't cause too much confusion, but I just want to make sure to point that out because that was what I encountered in my first go at the updated PriceBoss. And in case you come across something like that, just know if the data isn't all there from both sides, it's not going to work. And if you do run into issues like this, you can always reach out to Price Boss support and they will help you through it. But this is just another one of those things where the numbers have to all be there and working correctly in order for the math in formulas to work. So that's an overview of Price Boss for you. Again, I really did not get as deep as I could have gotten into this video, but as you can see, it's already a pretty long video. And if you do want to use this and figure out all the different things you can do with it, I'm sure Howard over at Landspeed would be more than happy to help you out. And if you get stuck on anything, he can help you through it as well. And I think my final thoughts and impressions on Price Boss are that it's definitely a useful tool. And I do appreciate how specific you can get with the comps that you choose to put in there. I think it's probably the highest level of control that I've seen of anything out there that does this kind of comping work. But on the same coin, I'll also say this is definitely not an idiot-proof piece of software, and I definitely put that to the test. And there was more than a couple times where I got stuck throughout the process. Either I didn't understand what I was supposed to do, and even though there are these training videos throughout, there's two possible issues with that. First of all, me or you as the user have to actually watch them in order for those videos to do any good. And sometimes it's just a lot easier to just try to speed through it and figure it out on your own and think you know what you're doing, and then you'll start running into issues. So in most cases, the correct process and procedure is definitely there and explained, but the user has to decide to actually go through that stuff. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing is that I even encountered some issues that weren't covered in these training videos. So just because the training videos are there doesn't mean it covers every possible glitch. Like, for example, this whole issue of data tree just randomly not having the zip codes for some odd reason. As Price Boss was put together, understandably, the assumption was that the zip codes would always be there because 99% of the time they are there. So when you come across like oddball issues like this that really aren't explained anywhere, you're going to be stuck until you can get a hold of Price Boss support and try to figure out how to do it. So that's what I mean when I say it's not an idiot-proof software. You do have to have some level of sophistication and willingness to learn how to use this stuff. But if you're willing to put the time into figuring out how to use this software, it can be a very, very powerful tool to have at your disposal. And if you're regularly in the process of trying to price properties and price offers and figure out property values, I would absolutely want to have this kind of tool in my corner. So there you go. Again, if you guys want to check it out, you can get a $50 discount on your setup fee if you use the RETipster coupon code when you sign up. Hope you found this helpful, and I wish you all the best as you're sending out offers and trying to figure out market values. Talk to you next time.